Hey everyone, Eason here, DevRel SpaceComputer, and today we're back with another video of building with cTRNG. In today's video, we'll be looking at building a password generator. Now, if you don't know what SpaceComputer is a project building secure computing systems using satellites in space. So think of it as launching computers and blockchain technology into orbit around the Earth. So everything that I'm going to walk you guys through today will be covered in our blog. So if you want additional reference, feel free to check it out. Links will be in the description below. Now, what we'll be utilizing today is cTRNG. And if you're not really familiar with what that means, cTRNG basically is a cosmic true random number generator. Basically, we're taking information through satellites in space and using that to create a random number, a random seed. All of that will be accessed through Orbitport, which is the gateway that we'll be using to utilize cTRNG. So everything in today's video will also be based off the previous blog and videos. So if you haven't already, feel free to pause the video and check it out. But we'll do a quick flow on how everything works. So what you would actually need to do before you can use cTRNG is that you would need an API access key. So currently it's in early access, so you have to fill up this form. The links are in the blog itself and will be in the description of this video as well. But you will have to create an API access key, which right after filling up the form, you should be able to get that immediately. So after you get your API credentials, you should be able to use that in authenticating with Orbitport's auth URL. And after you authenticate with the server, you can then use that access token in order to call Orbitport's cTRNG API. So in a really simplistic high-level overview, you as a user, you will call the app, which is a Next.js client. The app will handle all of the authentication, access token refreshes, and fetching information from the Orbitport API, and then sending that back to you, the user. And again, more details is in the previous blog. So let's take a look at what we'll be building today. Very simple password generator. You can set the length of the password. You can choose which characters to include. So let's say we don't want any symbols. And we can also set the minimum number of, for example, uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and also symbols. And after that, you can hit generate. And right now it's actually calling Orbitport's auth API, getting an access token, and then using that to call Orbitport cTRNG and getting that random seed back. And then after it gets that random seed, it's going to pass through an algorithm which basically creates this generated password. So you can view the seed that's actually used to create this password itself. Now, of course, everything here is for educational purposes only. You can feel free to modify it however you want and use it in production, but make sure that all of your code is audited and checked through properly before you push it into production. Alright, so going back to the blog, after you have your access keys, feel free to follow along in this video. So the first thing that we're going to do, if we look at the code itself, is by taking a look at the auth library. So the auth library is something that we've already built in a previous video. Handles all of the encryption, decryption of the JWT tokens, storing things in our cookies and stuff like that. We won't be walking through it in this video, so we can just skip that part. But I do want you guys to be aware of this auth library that we're building ourselves. The first thing that we'll actually take a look at is the random route. So once all of the API is ready, it's very easy for us to plug and play certain modules in or certain logic in order to use cTRNG for anything that we want. So in this example, what we're doing is that we're creating a Next.js API route that we'll call in order to authenticate with Orbitport, like I mentioned, and get the random seed. All you got to do is just copy everything here and paste it in, and you're basically done. It's that simple. But I'll walk you guys through how everything works. So you can see here right at the start, we are checking if we have a valid token within the cookies. If we don't, then we'll basically make an API call to fetch the access token, and all of that is actually done inside here itself in get valid token. So this is the auth library that I mentioned previously. And then if everything's okay and you have an access token, then you're going to use that in order to call cTRNG's API. For more information about the API as well, you can check out docs.spacecomputer.io, and we have information about the architecture. We have a user guide on how you're going to use it, the authentication steps, API requests and responses, and some additional information. But basically everything here is really pre-built for you. All you got to do is just copy and paste the code, and right after that you should be able to get the response that we are just returning as a JSON to the users. Alright, so after that we can actually just take that randomness seed and then creating a password generator library around that. So everything here can be modified however you want, and I'll show you guys how to do it as well, but it's really simple. You can of course make this password generator library way more complex. You can modify certain things, certain outputs, parameters. Yeah, it's fully customizable. So let me show you guys how it works. We have an interface called generate params, which is basically taking everything from the front end that the user is passing in, whether we want uppercase, lowercase, numbers, all of that, as well as the minimum number of characters for each one of these sets that we want. So everything is inside here, and using these params, we're actually generating that randomness over here in order to meet those requirements. So you can see here that we have a character set, and this character set is basically what we're using whenever we're generating the random number. So you can see here that we have a bunch of symbols that we can use, and of course there's symbols that we're missing as well, for example brackets, all of that. But again, this is entirely up to you. So maybe you're trying to use this for example Postgres on a CLI, and sometimes on CLIs it can be tricky with hashtags, it can be tricky with dollar signs, exclamation marks, stuff like that, right? So you can of course remove it if you don't want it. You can add in your own symbols. You can add basically anything that you want within this character set. So I'll walk you guys through the entire flow from the start. So what's going to happen is that you're going to call generate password from seed, and you're passing in that Orbitport cTRNG seed that we received through this API route, and then we're also passing in the params from the users that they input through the website. And based on that, we're actually just generating a random set of characters, and we're appending all of it into a string. And then after we have that, what's going to happen is that we're going to shuffle all of these characters so that they're all in random orders, and then we have a random string that basically we can use as a password. So again, anything here can be customizable. Feel free to go through the code as much as you want, and you should be able to create a more comprehensive password generator library if you want. Alright, so now we're on to the last part of the demo. So what's going to happen is that you're now going to implement that in your front end. So in the previous video, we also talked about how you can create a hook that you can use in your front end application. So since we're using React Next.js, what we could do is we could create a hook called use Orbitport. So we've already built that, and now we're reusing that again. And you can see how simple it is in order for us to build all of this in composable manners and just integrate all of them together in order to create any kind of application that we want. So in this hook, what we're basically doing is getting that random seed, which you can see here, calling the fetch API to our Next.js backend, and this is what we're going to use to actually pass in to this function over here. So now that we have all of the pieces together, we can now implement it in our front end under this handle generate function. So again, the code is already in the blog, so all you got to do is just copy and paste it in. So once we have everything in together, again I'll walk you guys through the flow. We're getting the random seed using the Orbitport hook, and then we're calling the password generator library, passing in the seed as well as the parameters that the user is passing in, and we're going to use that as a password, and then we're just going to set it in a use state in order for us to render it in the front end. So if everything works well, all you got to do is now run npm run dev and hit to localhost, and you should be able to play around with it. So we can do that really quick over here. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to mention is that after you receive the credentials from filling up the form, you have to paste it all inside here in the .env under client ID and client secret. You also need an auth secret, and this is for the Next.js API, where we're storing the cookies inside our browser. So this can be generated using npx auth, basically just a 32-byte random string that you can paste in here. But yeah, once everything is running, you should be able to see it on localhost. So let's see if it loads. There you go. And it's exactly like what we have in our demo. Change the password length. Let's say I want at least 8 symbols. Hit generate, and I can even show you guys the network tab so you guys know what's actually happening. So once we hit generate, we're actually making an API call to the random route like I mentioned, and then after receiving it, passing it through the library, and that's basically what we're using in order to get a random password. So there you go, guys. We have used everything that we learned from a previous video on how to interact with Orbitport's auth as well as cTRNG, and we're using it in a different application this time, which is for creating random passwords. You can see how easily composable all of the components are. All you gotta do is just take that seed, write a custom logic for how you want to use and interact with that random seed, and then you can basically build anything you want really quickly and really simple. In the future, we will have an SDK for all of the auth components as well. So it's going to be as simple as just doing an npm install and then building it with any framework that you want, and interacting with it however you like. So that's all in today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.